you come onto it so late? Why has Mr Cameron used you as a super sub?
I've been... Well, that's totally absurd.
Well, we haven't heard anything from you.
Nonsense. I've been out and about all over the place, and as local papers up and down the land will testify, I've been out on the streets. I've been making speeches up and down the country, and indeed throughout London. I stress, and before London listeners think I've been abandoning my city, I've been out and about on the pavements of London too. Yesterday, day before, and
do you get a warm welcome?
I will continue to.
You get a warm welcome, do you?
On the whole, I'm not going to. Don't want to provoke.
It's the most embarrassing moment you've had as you've been stomping up and down the streets of London and elsewhere.
Let me just think. Nothing really embarrassing. Actually, it's all been incredibly good-natured, and I think people have been... I think the truth is, for the first few weeks, you talk about, what have I been doing? I've been actually out and about campaigning a lot, but I think the truth is, for a lot of the time, people haven't really been focusing on this election. And it's only starting to crystallise now. The last few days. And don't forget, that is what happened in 1992 as well.
All right, OK. Let's get some calls through on an election call. Victoria's in Holborn. You're through to Boris Johnson. Go ahead, Victoria.
Good morning to you both.
Victoria,
I just wanted to ask, obviously, there's a lot of resentment against the SNP in parts of England at the moment, particularly. But is there not a threat that this could backfire and lead to the breakup of the union?
Well, let me just say, my resentment is not remotely against the SNP for being Scottish, or indeed, they're perfectly entitled to their views about the future of the United Kingdom. They want to break it up. That's their agenda. My anxiety is that the Labour Party can only form a government if it is in coalition with them. If you look at the numbers, they are being wiped out in Scotland. They will need to have those SNP guys backing them up if they're to get anything through Parliament. Yeah. So the risk, I think, therefore, is that they will be held to ransom by the SNP, and the only way to, and as I was saying to Nick just now, you'd have a lot of really crackers policies on defence, on spending.
What are those crackers policies?
Well,
Mr. Johnson.
The agenda of the SNP is, as far as I can understand it, is to borrow another £148 billion to have taxes, which they call more quote-unquote progressive taxes, on top of what Labour is already proposing by way of increasing corporation tax, increasing income tax. So under the SNP, you could imagine some sort of super tax would be imposed. There is a kind of chop-smacking relish with which the SNP and Labour Scotland approach the idea of, taxing the Sassenachs in London and the South East in order to pay for things in Scotland. And I've got to be fair. We accept in London that we have a duty to the rest of the country. We export huge sums in tax already. London is about 25% of UK GDP. Yes, of course that's fair. It's reasonable. But there comes a point when you're being a bit unfair to people who are living in homes in London that have inflated through no fault of their own. And you're asking them to pay an awful lot more out of their income. So I think there are all sorts of risks in that approach, in the Scottish nationalist tail wagging the Labour Party dog. I don't want to see that, and I think the only answer is to go for a Conservative majority government.
Let's go to Steve in Stevenage, appropriate enough. Go ahead, Stevenage, Steve.
Yeah, good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning.
Yes, good morning. In the last hour, they were talking about the migrants and, the problem of housing them or whatever. And, we've got a big housing problem here in the
we
UK.
Have, Steve.
Yeah. And we're a bit fed up in the sticks, though, that the Stevenage is quite rural, development of the crop fields for swift farmers' profits, So I really want to know what the Tory policy is.
Yeah, I can tell you absolutely clearly. I do not.
My question.
Oh, sorry, forgive me.
Yes, he said the Conservative policy is for what, Steve?
The policy is about brownfield development in particular.
Okay. Steve, my policy is not to let any development go ahead on...
So this is your policy or the Conservative policy?
And indeed, this is the Conservative policy, which I'm announcing ex cathedra. There's no...
Right.
There's a very sensible reason for this. The reason for doing this is not only to protect the beautiful aspects of the countryside and the peri-urban area around London that is, the lungs of the city, and we must protect, and there are all sorts of aesthetic reasons we want to do that. There's also absolutely hard-headed economic reasons, Steve, for not letting developers send their bulldozers through the green fields before they've developed the brownfield sites. They have and the minute you give them permission for greenfield development, they will forget all about those incredible sites that we have across London that are only now being regenerated. Many of these sites, of course, have got problems of contamination. They're very expensive to remediate. If you're a developer, you're always going to want to go for the greenfield option if you possibly can. And so look at what we've achieved in the Olympic Park, in Greenwich, what we're going to do in Old Oak Common, areas that are complete, that were, as it were, Rust Belt derelict areas that are now being transformed and
Steve,
being
let's get you back in. I heard you grumbling. Go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, hello there. I just wonder what incentives, though. I mean, I know UKIP, for instance, are proposing that there's some tax concessions that should be given to people who are prepared to develop brownfield sites. And I don't know why the Tories haven't thought of it, because brownfield sites, at the end of the day, are more likely to be in a place where there's existing work. The problem in the countryside is they're building housing estates where there's no prospects of employment.
Yeah.
So you're creating
Completely
along the A1 and the A10 and all the rest of it round here, and it's going to become a nightmare if it doesn't get detailed,
Well, the way to get things going on those brownfield sites, and I can speak with particular experience of what we've done in London. The way to get it going is to get the infrastructure ready, and that is that's the prime duty of the state. And we've invested massively in the transportation to get people to be able to set up work there. If you look at what's going on, for instance, in the Olympic Park, where you had an area that was pretty derelict. We could have decided just after the games to put in lots of infill housing. Instead, what we've done is gone for employment, we've gone for a university campus, we've gone for a cultural centre, and all sorts of stuff that will generate loads and loads of jobs, because that is what is happening in the area. So the tax concessions that we are offering, as it were, Steve, there are, for instance, there are specific tax concessions in the enterprise zones that we set up, but the biggest thing that the government can do, the biggest government spending that you can make, is to get the land ready by putting in the infrastructure.
Let's move on. You would agree that David Cameron is a very bright man, well-educated man, Mr. Johnson?
Yes, I certainly would, yes.
He was left stumped by a 10-year-old girl at a school in Manchester, Rima.
If you could pick one politician apart from yourself to win, who would it be and why?
Wow. If I could pick one politician, they have to be living or dead. Obviously, if I thought someone else should win the election, I wouldn't be standing myself. So I think I can't really answer the question about who else I'd like to win. There are lots of candidates around the country I'm very enthusiastic about. I'm afraid it's too difficult to say I'd like someone else to win rather than me. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here. I'm afraid I'm quite keen on winning.
So it's Rima 1, the Prime Minister 0, and Rima in Manchester is now through to you, Mr. Johnson, to ask you a question. This is 10-year-old Rima. Hello, Rima. Good morning to you. Thank you for calling the Mayor Johnson.
Rima.
What's your question to Boris?
My question is, if you could take back one decision that you made as mayor, what would it be and why?
Oh, brother. Let me just think. Rima.
Looks like it could be 2-0 to Rima.
No. Well, I tell you what I think. And I've said this before, and I might as well say it again, Rima. If what we should have done, the Thames Gateway Bridge was the wrong plan for that part of London. It would have meant terrible congestion up Knee Hill. It was a bad idea. But what we should have done, in my view, instead of just scrapping the plan, which was being thrown out by the planning, we effectively agreed with the planning. It's not a very long and boring answer to this, Rima, but we
She's 10.
I know, but there was okay, let me boil it down. There was a huge bridge which we decided not to go ahead with because it would have destroyed lots of communities in southeast London. What we should have done is gone ahead with a series of smaller bridges. But the good news is we're doing that now, Rima. We're now going ahead with a series of beautiful bridges,
Rima,
which will really transform the area.
Rima, you are but 10 and you've bested the Prime Minister and the Mayor. What are you going to do with your life? Do you know yet what you're going to be?
Either
A politician, scientist, or interior designer?
Well, interior designer, where did that one come from? The best of luck, Rima, when you thank your teacher. A great question and brilliantly asked. Perhaps I could ask one question of you, Mr. Mayor. There is a letter in the Times today that says the decision not to prosecute Labour peer Lord Janner over child abuse offences, which his family denies, should be reversed. It's concerns of a whitewash and it's damaging public confidence. How damaged is public confidence?
Well, I think it's very important that nobody should be under any impression that Greville Janner, Lord Janner, has had an easy ride from the CPS or has been in some way allowed to escape justice. And I have obviously some sympathy with the DPP, because they're trying to, as I understand it, they're trying to cope with the fact that the Lord Janner has dementia, and they can't see how.
In what way has he not had an easy ride?
They can't see how he could be put on trial. But
in what way has he not had an easy run?
In what way has he not
prosecution? He escaped prosecution 3 times. Now, I say again, his family deny all allegations. He escaped prosecution 3 times. The current DPP admits mistakes were made, and they should have gone to trial. The 4th time, sadly, it would appear the man is not fit enough to stand trial. Are you saying he's not had an easy ride? How would you describe it then?
Well, the guy had. Yes, I think it's obviously very, very. It's disgraceful. It's regrettable. And questions need to be asked, and there needs to be a proper analysis, if not an inquiry, into how we've managed to get to this position. It may be, but Nick, before you come back in full frothing magnificence.
I've just told you, yes, I've just been told, yes, in my ear. That's why I'm saying yes. So what do we do with these thousands of poor souls who are afloat in the Mediterranean of Libya?
Well done, LBC. And I do think that is an issue. I do think people who work hard should be paid reasonably.
Okay.
So my answers to Howard are, don't tell all foreigners to bog off.
Like Theresa May does.
Don't tell all foreigners to bog off. But don't take in people who want to scrub.
So you are at odds with the Home Secretary over this?
No, I'm completely at one and on all fours with the government.